fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody's ready for what should be a fun midweek show. You know, we're getting to late October. College football feels like there's more at stake as we get deeper into the season. Oh, by the way, we are under 2 weeks from college hoops. And so today we'll do a little bit of everything. A little college football, a little college basketball. We will start Nick Saban, really for the first time, actually speaking about the state of Bama football. Now, I'm not going to lie, I didn't go off or anything, but gave some very interesting comments that I want to dive into. What do they mean? What do they maybe not mean about the state of Bama football? From there, you know, we talked USC on Sunday night show, and I kind of danced around the Lincoln Riley hot seat conversation. So let's just dive in. What would it take for Lincoln Riley to not be back at USC next year? And then finally, we'll wrap with college hoops. We are now under 2 weeks away. We will hit on the biggest storylines in this sport as we are inching closer to the season. By the way, make sure to drop your questions, comments, thoughts into the chat here on YouTube because I'm fired up to hear from you on I was going to say Wednesday, but it's actually a Tuesday afternoon. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, first of all, make sure you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. YouTube, new clips, new videos going up every single day, and also on the podcast, full shows, all that good stuff. You want to do your boy Torres a favor, by the way, go on Apple, leave a 5-star rating, leave a 5-star review. Really would appreciate that support. Also, before we get started, do want to give a quick shout out to one of our favorite sponsors, and that is Blue Chew and BlueChew.com. Fellas, remember the days when you were always ready to go? Well, now, like I said on Sunday, maybe you're a Bama fan. Maybe things aren't quite working the way they used to. Whatever the case may be, that is where Blue Chew comes in. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in chewable form. To get started with Blue Chew, it's easy. Just go to BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, all of it is done online. No awkward trips to the doctors, no waiting at the pharmacy, no stink eyes, no raised eyebrows, no nothing. Of course, while that sounds great, I know many of you are probably wondering, Torres, does it actually work? Well, I'll tell you what, try it for a month for free, and you can see for yourself. You're going to love it. Your partner's going to love it. You might be a Bama fan and your football team stinks, but you'll be going full speed ahead like the 2012 Tide between the sheets, and you'll have Blue Chew to thank. So try it out for now, and the best part is, as I mentioned, Blue Chew has a special offer for listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod. Go to BlueChew.com and use promo code Torres at checkout. When you use promo code Torres, you know what that means? It means you pay only $5 in shipping. The product itself is free. BlueChew.com, promo code Torres, free product, $5 in shipping. That's all you got to pay. You get your first month for free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. We thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, it is a Tuesday afternoon. Like I said, late October, the stakes are high in college football. College hoops is right around the corner. There is no more time to waste. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, it's the middle of the week, but I would argue that there is still no bigger story in all of college football than what's going on at Bama. Now, to be clear, want to be fair, does not mean that the season's over, that the program is dead, that everything's dying. But at the same time, we also have to acknowledge what our eyes see. It's not just 2 losses in the last 3 games, by the way, Neyland Stadium with 100,000 people in it ain't an easy place to play, okay? It's not just that. It is, as we discussed on Sunday, it's not just the style of play or how it's going down. It's the fact that everything that this program was built on under Nick Saban appears to be disappearing. Not the on-the-field results or plays or schemes or whatever, but instead the discipline, the accountability. We talked about Nick Saban's process and how it feels like that is just slowly slipping through the fingertips of all things Alabama football. So Alabama football, it is reeling. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. They're 5-2. What is it? The first time in forever that they've had 2 losses before the month of October is out. And everyone's looking for answers. And the one thing I would also say, everybody's looking for what Nick Saban thinks about this. And it's interesting because Nick Saban, even though he's in the media, I was thinking about this. I don't really feel like outside of College Game Day on Saturday and Pat McAfee's show on whatever day it is, Friday afternoon, we don't really hear a lot from Nick Saban. And so what's interesting to me is whenever he speaks, whatever he says, by the time he says it, it doesn't really, make waves kind of on the internet and in that world, because by the time he says it, games get played, whatever. We all move on very quickly. I think the only thing he's really said of note is the Vanderbilt stuff, whatever. Well, I bring it up because Monday, he was speaking at the Tuscaloosa I think it was the Birmingham Quarterback Club, one of these booster events, and was asked about many different things. Asked about Miss Terry's win-loss record and how she's picking games better than him, but also asked about the state of Alabama football. And I haven't, maybe I've missed it. I haven't really heard him talk very much about Alabama. Well, he gave some interesting comments. I'll be transparent. Certainly nothing vicious or mean-spirited or angry, but producer Matt, throw up on the screen what Nick Saban had to say about the state of Bama football. He said, the most important thing all of us can do as fans for Alabama is to be supportive. Support the program, support the players, support the coaches. That will enhance us to be able to have the best solution and transition, because it's always a difficult transition when you have a fairly successful program. Stay focused on what you have to do and try to make the team better. I'm not going to get in a position to judge anybody. I'm a fan now. I want the team to do well, and I want our fans to support the team the best they can. So that was what Nick Saban had to say about the state of Alabama football. I want to dive in. Let me start by saying this. First of all, I commend him. He's in a tough spot. You know he's going to be asked about it. You know the program that he left behind is not living up to the standard that he set, okay? But I thought he said everything right. Didn't throw anybody on the bus, didn't blame the players, didn't blame the coaches. I'm a fan. I want to support things. And before we even get into the quotes, let me add 2 little kind of quick caveats to what Nick Saban said, okay? One, I think even Nick Saban would admit this is a new era. I didn't figure it out. It's the reason that I'm no longer coaching college football is because I couldn't totally figure out this era, NIL, portal, player movement. And so even Nick Saban would admit, nobody has all the answers right now. Kirby Smart doesn't. Steve Sarkisian doesn't. I don't. Kalen DeBoer doesn't. Whatever. And I'll also say before I get into this, I don't think because Alabama has lost 2 of 3 that Kalen DeBoer is the worst coach that's ever been in the SEC, okay? I think he's a really good coach. Do think, if there's certain things that he can get back on track, do think he can be successful there. Do think he can win at the highest level there. And obviously in a 12-team playoff era, 1 loss, even 2, isn't going to eliminate you from anything. But at the same time, where I do think it does get interesting is kind of just the state of the program as a whole. And I would be curious, right? Because Nick Saban said all the right things. I'm a fan now, blah, 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 this and that. But if you gave him some truth serum, and he doesn't drink alcohol, so you can't ply him with tequila or vodka or whatever, I'd be curious what he'd really say. Because to me, what has been most disappointing about Alabama, I would suspect, is the most disappointing thing in his eyes as well. Not that Alabama's struggling on the field. Not that they've lost 2 of 3. But that the standard that Nick Saban set appears to be disappearing by the minute. And to me, that's really the only thing that, in my opinion, has been disappointing about the Kalen DeBoer era. Because at the end of the day, listen, I was very excited about this hire. I talked about it a lot in January, February as we got in, out of the hire. We talked about every recruiting move, whatever. And so now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, Torres, you're turning on Kalen DeBoer. I'm not turning on Kalen DeBoer. But what I am saying is that what made Alabama different, we talked about this on Sunday's show, it wasn't just the talent on the field. It wasn't the scheme. It wasn't the coaching staffs, although Nick Saban had some great ones. It was that they held themselves to a higher standard and the highest standard that you could possibly have. We talked about it. It was called the process, right? It was called the process. And what was amazing about the process, it was the simplest ethos that you could have as a program. It was take care of the little things and the big things will take care of themselves. The best example, and we didn't talk about it on Sunday, but go back to that 2012 national championship game. That was the year Alabama was playing Notre Dame, the famous, Brent Musburger calling out and referencing, let's just put it that way delicately, A.J. McCarron's girlfriend in the stands. But what is the memorable, iconic moment about that game if you're an Alabama fan? Besides the fact that you just steamrolled, literally and figuratively, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It was late in the game. Alabama was up, comfortable lead. No way they could blow it. I want to say it was maybe 42-7. I think that was the final score. Minute or two left in the game. And what ends up happening? Something happens. A.J. McCarron has to call a timeout. And the second that A.J. McCarron calls the timeout, he starts screaming at his center. Because the center basically sat there and said, the two of them basically are screaming at each other, trying to figure out what the situation is. It sounds like we have a little bit of technical audio difficulties. I apologize if that's the case. We'll try to figure it out as best we can. But to go back to what I just said, with A.J. McCarron, he's screaming at his center. I believe it was Barrett Jones, but that was the standard. It was whatever is going on. This isn't good enough. You need to be better. I need to be better. I don't care if we're up 35 points in a national championship game. This is unacceptable. Well, fast forward to now and what we see from the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's frustrating. It's disappointing. And again, it's not the on-the-field football stuff. What is it? It's all of the other little things that are creeping into this program. It's the fact that in the biggest moment of the game on Saturday, one of their players, Kendrick Law, unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, that 4th and 7 became 4th and 22. You could criticize Kalen DeBoer for going for it, but in his head, he's thinking he's going for 4th and 7. Now it's 4th and 22. You think about whatever. You think about the Malachi Moore play at Vanderbilt. He kicks the football. You think about the fact, by the way, other people have sent me other stuff since Saturday. You have the coaching staff, not everybody, but one or two members of the staff walking into Neyland Stadium with cigars in their mouths. What are we doing? It's the fact that Alabama is 128th nationally in penalty yardage. And so with Nick Saban, he said all the right things, but how can he not be frustrated? Because it's ultimately mostly the same guy. I don't want to say mostly because I know a lot of players left, a lot of players came in, but it doesn't change the fact who are the leaders on this team. Jalen Milroe was there last year. Tyler Booker was there last year. Jahad Campbell, linebacker, was there last year. The leaders on this team are the players that were in that locker room a year ago. And so, yeah, some of it falls on Kalen DeBoer. Some of it falls on those leaders, but it is unacceptable the manner in which this team is behaving on and off the field. And I think that is where Nick Saban would have his most frustration, is the fact that everything he built, it does not look the same. It does not feel the same. You cannot deny it. And for people, by the way, because this is going to be in the comment section, Saban didn't have it figured out either. Torres, you just said that. They were really Listen, 2 years ago was the most disappointing year of Nick Saban's career. Bryce Young, Will Anderson, number 1, number 3 picks in the draft, and they end up losing 2 games and don't make the playoff. Counter to that, though, last year was probably Nick Saban's best year. You win the SEC, 0 SEC losses. You beat Georgia. and he did an amazing job. So don't tell me that it can't be done, especially with this program. So I'll be curious if Nick Saban expands on these comments. I don't watch a ton of game day on Saturday mornings, but would love to hear what he has to say, because I think, again, the frustration isn't in the losses themselves. It's in the fact that the standard that he set, the standard, by the way, that his players helped him set, right? We talk about it all the time. The players are the ones in the locker room. The players are the ones in those summer workouts where the coaching staff can't be. Some of this is on Jalen Milroe. Some of it's on the guys we mentioned, Jahad Campbell, Tyler Booker, whoever those guys are that are back from a year ago. So it's disappointing. If I'm Saban, I'm furious watching this. Mostly just disappointed, though. But it's got to get solved in a hurry. Now, the good thing, I'll say this. Bama's a 13.5-point favorite against Missouri this week. I was actually surprised by that number. Maybe it says a little bit about Missouri maybe not being as good as we thought. I think it also says that Bama maybe is in a spot where they bounce back. And what it really says is they're still talented enough to reach their ceiling this season. So we'll see what happens. Doesn't mean that DeBoer is the worst coach that's ever walked the face of the earth, but Bama fans are frustrated with how this program is acting and behaving. I don't blame them one bit. And I'd be curious what Nick Saban would have to say about that. All right, hope we work through those technical difficulties. Apologize if the audio wasn't great early. This is what we're going to do. Take a quick break, come back. When we come back, Lincoln Riley and USC are a total dumpster fire. Had some of you ask me about it since our last show, so I want to go ahead and dive in. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So want to go ahead and continue the college football conversation. Want to do a little bit of a follow-up from Sunday night's Aaron Torres pod. And I'll be honest. So, for people who don't know, I live in LA. I'm around USC all the time. I'm on campus, once a month, whatever. And I bring it up because when USC lost again, I had a bunch of people. By the way, I was going to actually go to the game on Friday night against Rutgers. Game 1 of the World Series, not happening at all. I will be drinking some cold beverages and watching the Dodgers instead, because that's going to be a much more enjoyable experience. Anyway, that's not really what this is about. Not about the World Series. By the way, World Series pick Dodgers in 6, neither here nor there. But let's keep it going. Let's talk USC. But it was funny because, after they lost on Saturday to Maryland, I had a bunch of you like, Torres, you going to talk about them? Torres, what's going on? Blah, 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 this and that. And I really didn't, in my head, feel like there was a lot to talk about. Another loss, disappointing team, disappointing program, really haven't been very good for over a calendar year now, dating back to their 6-0 start a season ago. So I felt like, what is there really to talk about? And then I did the goofy segment of comparing who has it worse, Lincoln Riley's former team, Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley's current team, USC. We should have just talked Lincoln Riley, because when I did that segment, all anybody wanted to do was, Torres, what is happening at USC? What would it actually take for Lincoln Riley to be gone? and all of the conversations that come with him. And I think there's the added twist now with Oklahoma struggling of, does he regret it? Should Oklahoma have, like all these conversations? But let's dive into the USC stuff specifically. And let's ask the most basic fundamental question, because everybody has their hot seat this and their this and that, blah, blah, blah. Let's dive in. And let me start by saying this. Lincoln Riley's not getting fired. Okay. So like, I think sometimes in the media, we get so, not me necessarily, but everyone gets so caught up in a moment or this or that. Let's just get one thing straight. Lincoln Riley is not getting fired, not this offseason, not anytime soon. They could lose every game on the schedule the rest of the year, finish 3-9. It ain't happening. Okay. The bottom line is, we don't know the full details of the contract. It's what the reports are. It's $110 million, fully guaranteed. By the way, we don't know the full details of the contract because it is a private school. They don't have to make it public. But I just bring it up. We think it's $110 million. If it's fully guaranteed and they fired him, we're talking about whatever, 80, 85 million guaranteed to make him go away. That is not happening. But I do think, I'll say this, I think this situation has gotten way worse than even I expected. And like, I thought Lincoln Riley was good, but I kind of thought they would be disappointing last year. I thought they'd be okay this year, but I thought okay was like 8-4, 9-3. Well, they're already 3-4. They still have a couple tough games ahead, and I don't know how this gets better. First of all, let me say this. When you actually look at the stats of Lincoln Riley's tenure at USC, a bigger debacle that I think you realize, especially considering the way that it started. It's easy to forget this now. Year one, regular season, Lincoln Riley started 11-1 as the head coach of the USC Trojans, okay? So you look at that 11-1 start. I remember talking about it on the show at this time, on this show. I said, listen, it's like he just picked up everything in Norman, brought it to LA, and they haven't missed a beat. They start 11-1. Their only loss is to Utah by 1 point on the road. They go to the Pac-12 championship game. And they were leading until Caleb Williams got hurt. Like, they easily could have made the college football playoff, a 14 playoff 2 seasons ago. Not last year, but the year before. And so I bring it up because it's kind of incredible of everything that's happened since. That first year, loses final 2 games, Utah in the Pac-12 championship, losing the bowl game. And then the crazy part is last year, you actually started 6-0. So that's where it gets interesting. You forget like how quickly it's fallen apart. They were 6-0 in early October of last year. Since then, they finished last year 2-5. They're 3-4. So I'm not great in math, but that means they're 5-9 in their last 14 games over the last calendar year. They have 4 straight losses on the road. I'm just going to read you the wins that USC has in the last calendar year. They won at Cal by 1 point. They put up 50 points. Caleb Williams had to bail them out time and time again. They beat Louisville at a bowl game. They did have that win over LSU, which is looking good by the week. They beat Utah State at home, and they beat Wisconsin. That's literally it. Now, the issue is, it's not just that you're losing games, but especially of late, who you're losing to. Now, last year, I'm not saying it's okay, but at Notre Dame was a pretty good team. Weather was weird, whatever. Washington was better than people realized. Michael Penix, they end up playing for a national championship. Oregon was pretty good. So I'm not saying the losses were okay, but some of them you kind of look back on, okay, whatever. This year, at Maryland, at Minnesota, Penn State, which is certainly not a terrible loss, but the problem with Penn State is the same thing that happened last week. You were up by double figures at the half. It was a situation where against Penn State, 20-6 at the half. This past week, you're up 14 points against Maryland, and you cannot close out these games. And so the defense, which got so much praise early, is struggling now. And as far as the big picture, Lincoln Riley ain't getting fired, but like, I don't really see how this whole situation gets better. Like, if you actually go back and listen to the Oklahoma versus USC conversation from a day ago, I remember what I said was, I think Oklahoma's situation is better because Oklahoma has a quarterback problem and they really have an O-line problem. If they get the O-line figured out, the quarterback will look better and they might not be terrible because the defense is still really good. Oklahoma since fired their head coach. But look at USC. Like, think about this program right now. 1, Miller Moss probably just isn't good enough at quarterback. Not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to be a realist. He had a great game against LSU in the opener. Obviously played really well in the bowl game to keep the job in the first place. And if you're looking for a little bit of a silver lining, if you do believe in Miller Moss, that wide receiver core is young. So assuming nothing crazy happens, assuming Lincoln Riley is back, and assuming the portal doesn't go bananas, you're going to have your whole receiving core and your quarterback back a season from now. Here's the question, though. O-line isn't very good, isn't getting better. The defense is improved, but we have seen them in second halves the last couple weeks. They are not getting better. They're actually regressing as the season goes on. They can't get off the field when they need to, which is a concern. And then I think on top of that, the defense is actually kind of a veteran group. I went and looked it up, and I was kind of stunned by this. Of USC's top 16 tacklers, 13 of them are seniors. So the defense isn't very good. It's regressing, and it's a veteran group. You're going to have to replace that whole team. The O-line isn't good enough. The skill position guys are young. And then here's the other issue. Like, recruiting's okay. Recruiting ain't great, though. 10th ranked class in the country. But the star of the class, Juju Lewis, the 5-star quarterback, feels like every other week he's taking another visit. Every other week is he going to end up somewhere else. On top of that, there's not a lot in that class outside of Juju Lewis. And it's not like you're like on this insane recruiting roll. I mean, think about the hot teams in recruiting. Okay. And I'm not going to bore everybody with recruiting rankings now. Auburn's recruiting well, even as they struggle on the field. A&M's recruiting well. Oregon's recruiting well. Tennessee's recruiting well. Like, USC is on the fringes of the top 10. It doesn't feel like this class is like going to close with a bang or anything. You might lose the quarterback of the future. And by the way, you're not even recruiting well in Southern California. Like, that to me is kind of the wild part. What is the recruiting philosophy of Lincoln Riley? Because right now, I looked it up this morning. Of the top 15 high school players in Southern California, how about this? 2 of them are committed to USC. For example, there are more players committed to Alabama in the top 15 of the 24/7 recruiting rankings out of California than are committed to USC. There are more committed to Texas A&M than committed to USC. I mean, it's one thing if it's Bama, it's the standard, it's coming off an SEC title, but Texas A&M, Oregon is coming in and getting guys that they want. And so how does this get better? I don't know. And I don't know what that means for the future of Lincoln Riley. Now, I don't think he's out after this year, but I'll tell you, you just watch these games, you watch these press conferences. I don't think he's happy. I don't think he wants to be in Southern California. Listen, I'll say this. I'm not from Southern California. I live in Southern California. It's a lot if you don't want to be here. It doesn't matter how much money you make. I know he's got that huge mansion in the hills. That mansion's tough to get to in rush hour traffic, okay? So he's probably spending a lot of time in the office, can't get home very easily. The team's not winning. You got a lot of cross-country flights. And remember, listen, you could criticize how he left Oklahoma, but he didn't come to USC expecting to be in the Big Ten. And I don't think he's afraid of the competition, but the travel is kind of a grind. I mean, think about their last, 5 weeks of the season? At Michigan, back to LA for Wisconsin, at Minnesota, back to LA for Penn State, at who they just play, Maryland. That is a crazy flight. By the way, I just did an LA to Maryland flight. I was screwed up for 3 days by the time that I landed, okay? So it's a lot, and I don't think he's happy, and I'm just curious what the next steps are. Now, again, he's not getting fired, but is there a possibility that he starts to look around? Is there an NFL opportunity? Is there a college opportunity that makes more sense? I'd be curious to know not even what his buyout is at USC, but if it will cost him anything to take another college job. The other thing, by the way, the AD that hired him, Mike Bone, is no longer there. He got fired about 18 months ago. Now, it's not to say that Jen Cohen isn't a good AD. It is fair to say, though, like, is he happy? Does he want to be there? Didn't sign up for the Big Ten. The AD he hired isn't there. It sounds like I'm making excuses. What I'm just trying to do is process, like, what's going on and how does it get fixed? Because I'll be honest, I don't know what the answers are. I think it's really ugly. And if this keeps going, I mean, it's going to go. I mean, let me just say this really quick, because I know I'm kind of rambling. This is going to have to go down as one of the worst hires in the history of college football, right? Like if this doesn't work out, like if he goes to the NFL after this year, and I don't know why an NFL team would hire him, I think after next year, if it doesn't work out, maybe the conversation about him moving on. Like, I don't know what else there is to say. It would have to go down as one of the worst hires, especially considering how good he was, the success that he had, the stat that everybody's throwing around. I think he lost 12 games his entire time at Oklahoma. He's now lost 12 games already at USC. It ain't good. It ain't getting better. And I'll tell you this, I don't think it's getting better anytime soon. I don't know what the fix is. And like I said, be curious if he tries to find something else in the offseason. And then beyond that, is there a possibility if it goes sideways again next year, maybe that is when they move on. All right, this is what I want to do. I want to go ahead and switch gears, talk a little bit of college hoops. Before I do, though, do want to welcome back one of our favorite partners, and that is Cauley Puffs, and of course their website, CauleyPuffs.com. Okay, so here is the bottom line. It's football season. You're on the couch. You're on the couch all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Monday night, we had 2 Monday night football games. You're on the couch Thursday night, and you're sitting there saying, Torres, I can't stop watching football. I got fantasy. I got this. I got that. But I also want to eat something healthy so I don't turn into a fat slop. Well, guess what? That is where Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com comes in, okay? So Cauley Puffs is the alternative snack item in your grocery store. You've all been there. I've been there. We've all been there. Go to the grocery store. It all tastes good, but is it good for you? The Lay's, the Doritos, the Fritos, the whatever. Well, Cauley Puffs, they are the healthy alternative that actually tastes good. First of all, they are in fact healthy, baked, not fried. Healthy ingredients, avocado oil, you go on and on down the list. But here's the best part. They taste delicious. They sent us a couple boxes to the Torres household. We can't stop eating them. When I drop on the floor, my dog sprints across the hall to grab her Cauley Puffs when they fall on the floor. So they are delicious. They are healthy. And you can try yours out for, right now at CauleyPuffs.com. All you got to do, go to CauleyPuffs.com, try them out for yourself. By the way, they are also available on Amazon. So go to Amazon.com, whatever you're buying on Amazon. If you're buying groceries, throw some Cauley Puffs in. Buying car parts, throw some Cauley Puffs in. If you're buying whatever that I don't want to know about because I don't want to know what's in your cart, throw some Cauley Puffs in. For more information, as I said, go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com. But these things are delicious. These things are healthy. Try them. I promise you'll like them. Tell them Torres sent you. Cauley Puffs. Thank you to Cauley Puffs. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap the show here because this is crazy to me. And listen, this happens to me every year, so I probably shouldn't be surprised, but it is kind of wild. We're so close to college basketball. And like I said, every year kind of sneaks up on me. It's that time of the season where there's a lot of stuff going on in football. I love to cover both, but college hoops is like, 10 days away, 12 days away, something like that, next Monday, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So not this coming Monday, by the way, but the next one. So what I want to do now, we'll probably do a little college hoops on all of the main shows going forward. Let's go ahead and just talk about the biggest storylines coming in. I know you're focused on your team. You've probably forgotten a lot of the stuff that's happened since last year. And Torres has the goods. I deliver, much like Cauley Puffs, by the way. So let's get into what I believe to be the 5 biggest stories in college hoops this year. Cannot believe that we are like 10 days away from the start of college basketball season. Story number 1. It feels obvious to me. It's UConn going for a three-peat, okay? And we are literally, listen, there are times where we think, is this historic? Is that historic? Whatever. Bottom line is UConn going for 3 straight. We have literally in our lifetimes, unless you're like 60 plus, never seen anything like this, okay? Wooden's teams did it back in the day. But listen, even the Christian Laettner Duke team, even the Florida team, I talked about this during the championship run in the spring. Everybody said, oh, UConn's the first team to win a national back-to-back titles since Florida in 07 and 08. That is true, or 06, 07, excuse me. That is true. But even what UConn did last year, we've really never seen before. Because you go back to that Florida team, they returned all 5 starters from the year before. You go back to Duke in 91-92, they returned 4 or 5 starters. UConn lost 3 of its top 4 players, still won a natty. They're still in the top 5 this year. And I think, listen, I saw him practice. I was sworn to secrecy when I was back into Connecticut, but they have since played an exhibition game. And I'll tell you this, whether it was practice, whether it was the exhibition game, they're going to have a team that's good enough to do it again this year. Now, will they? It remains to be seen. There's 68 teams make the tournament. Only one of them can win it. But do they have a team? Absolutely good enough. I think what's going to be different this year, listen, I don't think they're going to come out of the gate quite like they did a year ago. You got to remember, they ended up with 4 draft picks on that team, 2 lottery picks, 2 fifth-year seniors. That is not who this team is. If you watch the preseason game against Rhode Island, started a true freshman in Liam McNeely, who's now a little bit banged up. Solo Ball, who played limited minutes a year ago. Caravan's back. But Hassan Diarra was the 6th man. So I bring it up because last year they just returned a lot of veterans, a lot of dudes who had played a lot of college basketball, and 2 guys that were ultimately lottery picks, right? So it's going to be different this year. The one thing I will say, they're very clearly deeper. Like, I don't know how Hurley's going to divvy up minutes, divvy up playing time, whatever. Now, he's got that thing rolling where he'll figure it out. And the number one thing he's going to have to say is, you want to play, you got to earn it, you got to work for it. So it's fascinating to see. I cannot wait to see this team. Will they win a 3rd straight title? No one knows. But can they? Oh, that team can. Absolutely. Let's keep it going. College hoops storyline number 2. New faces and new places, right? You look at all these new coaches, and I think this is absolutely a byproduct of the portal and of NIL. You have a down season or 2. You're looking for a way out because the boosters aren't as excited. They don't want to donate quite as much. I get it. If I was writing checks, I would not be happy either. But we know the trickle-down effect. Started SMU firing its head coach. Andy Enfield goes from USC to SMU. Eric Musselman goes from from Arkansas to USC. John Calipari goes from Kentucky to Arkansas. Mark Pope goes from BYU to Kentucky. And the little loop wraps with Kevin Young taking the BYU job. Now, in terms of the new names, new faces, new places, I'm just fascinated by those guys that really had to replace like an entire roster, right? Like, I'm not talking Kevin Young, and we had him on the show. He's awesome, great at what he does, but he brings back 4 marquee players that played on that BYU team a year ago. But with Calipari, brings back 1 player at Arkansas. USC, I believe, 1 scholarship player. Kentucky brings back 0 players from a year ago. And then, oh, by the way, you look at somebody like Louisville, Pat Kelsey, who I'm excited about, brings back 0 players from Louisville as well. And so it'll be fascinating to watch how it all unfolds and really who can figure out this flipping an entire roster thing, right? Because there's some stat out there. I forget what it is. I think it was like every team that, like, there wasn't a single team that replaced more than 8 players last year in the portal that made the NCAA tournament. I can't remember the number exactly. I know Memphis was one that missed the tournament. I know that Arkansas was one that missed the tournament. But this year does feel different. I don't think that stat equates to this specific set of circumstances. Calipari's used to flipping over basically an entire roster. I actually think Calipari at Arkansas brings 3 players who have already played for him, which I do think matters. Kentucky, they're veteran. There is no way I see that team missing the tournament. I think they're going to be better than people realize. You keep it going. Musselman's used to flipping over a roster. I don't think it's a big deal for him. But you just talk about the fascinating new names, new places. Cannot wait to see, Calipari's got that big game early against Baylor. By the way, got the charity exhibition on Friday against Kansas. Cannot wait to watch that. And then, of course, Kentucky, they're full speed ahead, all that. So I am so excited for this season ahead. I cannot believe that we are already here. But new faces and new places is number 2, excuse me. Number 3, most notable player in the sport, it's Cooper Flagg. And listen, one thing that I have done throughout the years, and it's not because he's a Duke guy, but it could be any high school player. I always try to temper expectations. It's never as easy as it looks. And very rarely do freshmen come in and absolutely dominate the sport. We've had some. Zion Williamson, Anthony Davis, Derrick Rose back in the day. But the number of guys that actually step in and are awesome is much fewer than you think. Now, I bring that up to say I'm just really excited about the Cooper Flagg experience for 2 different reasons. One, I just appreciate that he's bringing eyeballs to this sport. playing in that Team USA select team this past summer, those highlights that leaked out, like people are invested in how good is this. He might not even be the best freshman in college basketball. Might be Ace Bailey, might be Dylan Harper, who are both playing at Rutgers. But at the same time, I think you got to be excited because he's going to bring so many eyeballs and so much interest to this sport. Is he as good as advertised? And then two, I think Duke's got a really interesting group around him. John Shire, you like him, you hate him, whatever. He put a bunch of veterans around Cooper Flagg, and those veterans kind of accentuate his skill set. A lot of three-point shooting, a lot of ability, a lot of, so Cooper Flagg is kind of a playmaker at 6'8", 6'9". He's got a lot of dudes around him that are going to help. Sion James from Tulane is a very good player. Some of the other transfers, some of the other freshmen. So that Cooper Flagg experience to me is awesome. I cannot wait to see. By the way, you're always welcome to drop your thoughts on the college hoop season ahead in the comment section. Let's get to number 4. I'll tell you this, in the era of super conferences, I'm just fascinated about these loaded conferences where you just see so much talent. The SEC and the Big 12 specifically are by far the two best conferences to me. And I think what's interesting to me is we're kind of seeing it in football right now, right? Is somebody's got to finish in 16th in the SEC. Somebody's got to finish 18th in the Big 10. And what does that mean for the whole ecosystem of college basketball? By the way, I think what's going to be fascinating this year, there's teams that are going to finish 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th in a conference that are potentially good enough to make a Final Four. I don't want to say to win a national championship, but maybe somewhere close. When I look at the Big 12, that league is stacked, okay? And my final top 25, and by the way, I had the same top 10 as the AP. I had 5 Big 12 teams in my top 10. Kansas, Houston, Iowa State, Baylor, now Arizona. Oh, by the way, I have Kansas State and BYU also at my top 25. I don't include Cincinnati and Texas Tech, which did make the preseason top 25. So that's 9 teams right there that everybody pretty much universally likes in that conference. Doesn't include, somebody's going to sneak up, somebody's going to surprise some people, whatever. But what happens in that league? Who steps up? But who is that team that loses 3 out of 4 that's actually pretty good? That actually is better than people realize. Fascinated to see that. And the SEC, it's much the same. The SEC, I believe I finished with 6 teams in my top 25. Let me pull it up really quick. I did have in my final top 25, I had Bama. Let's see here. I had Bama, Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Florida. That's 6. Texas and Texas A&M both made the AP top 25. They were not in the AT top 25. So that's 8 teams right there. Doesn't include Ole Miss, by the way, Ole Miss also made the top 25. Mississippi State's going to be good. I think Missouri is going to be improved. Like, you look at that league is going to be insane. And again, I think there's teams that are going to finish 8-8 that feel pretty good. I'll give you a quick side story, and I want to get to my last one, and maybe even some questions or comments depending. Is that you look at the Big 12, or you look at the SEC, excuse me. And I just think there's a lot of really good teams, really interesting teams. And the story that I was going to tell was, I remember talking to a Big 12 coach like 3-4 years ago, and he finished like 9-9 and then made a run in the tournament. And I was like, what's the secret? How did you have success? And he basically said, like, Torres, we were always good. It's just you can't win like 5 of 6 in the Big 12. It just can't happen. There were too many good teams, too many tough venues. We knew we were good. We knew it would be easier once we got to the NCAA tournament than it was in the Big 12. Kind of funny. I remember Jim Calhoun said that. They win the title in 2011. He said winning the Big East this year was harder than winning the Big 12 or winning the Big East. Winning the NCAA tournament was harder than winning the Big East. So I bring it up. Apparently I'm having microphone issues again. I apologize. We'll get this figured out after the show. But bottom line is SEC, Big 12 are totally stacked. And then finally, I do want to talk a little bit about the dark side of expanded conferences. And it's like I said, somebody's got to finish in 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 15th, 18th in some leagues. And how does that impact, again, the ecosystem of college basketball? Because I think we're seeing it in college football right now. And this goes back to when these realignment decisions were made. I can go back to the day that we found out that Texas and Oklahoma were going to the SEC. And I said, from the Texas-Oklahoma perspective, I don't know why you would want to do it. Listen, we know the reason is money. But why would you want to do it if you're Texas and Oklahoma? You have a sweetheart deal in the Big 12. This was before a 12-team playoff in football. And then I said, if you're Kentucky, Auburn, Vandy, whoever, why do you want this? Because when you bring in more teams, it just knocks teams down the pecking order. And in college football, we've seen it's not fun to be a Kentucky fan right now. No disrespect. It's not fun to be an Auburn fan. It's not fun to be an Oklahoma fan. When you have a 16-team league, here's a crazy stat for you. Somebody's got to finish in 16th. And so, I understood, but I never understood why everybody was in such a rush to expand just to add a couple dollars and cents to your checkbook. It's like if you got to fire a coach every 3 years, what are you excited about? And I think we're going to see that in college basketball this year. You look at some of these conferences, look at the SEC. I think Porter Moser is a pretty good coach. He has struggled for a couple of years at Oklahoma. If it does not go well this year, he's probably getting fired. And I don't think he's a bad coach. Matt McMahon at LSU, we've had him on the show. I don't think he's a bad coach. But somebody's got to finish in 16th place in the SEC. And if you do, you're probably getting fired. And if you're not getting fired, it's, you're on a short leash going into the next year. So that is what I'm excited about college hoops. I apologize for any mic issues that I have. And I think we're going to go ahead and get out of here on that note because we're having some sort of technical difficulty today that I can't quite figure out. So I'll tell you what. Do me a favor. We'll get the mic fixed. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media, at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. That is all for today's show. I am going to get out of here. We will get these technical issues figured out. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, NBA season opener tonight, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. By the way, we might have to do a Bronny segment on the next show. This is not a historic moment. I know I said I'm off. This is not a historic moment with Bronny. It is LeBron's ego getting in the way. LeBron's ego. Listen, parents are allowed to do something to help their kids advance in their respective career. Doesn't mean we have to, pretend it's anything other than that. When a doctor gets his son into a school that he shouldn't get into, we don't celebrate because the guy gets D's when he gets there. It's the same with Bronny. No disrespect to the kid. He shouldn't be there. That's it. That's all for today's show. Appreciate everybody's support. Appreciate everybody's patience. We will be back later this week.